Hello and welcome to the Tori and Ren YouTube channel. Today we're going to be making one of these Forest Friends box bags. They look just like this. And I have a couple different ones here. This one is gardening with cats. This one's fairies on both sides. And this one's forest animals, which is actually where the name of the bag came from. It was from this one. Now what's awesome about these bags is they have two zipper pulls, so the bag actually opens quite wide. And it is deep, so you can put a lot of stuff in here. Now, if you'd like to make one of these, you can keep watching because I have the full instructions and measurements in this video, or you can check out my Etsy shop down below for the written instructions. Let's get started. Gonna get these ones out of the way. Starting with print A, you're gonna need two pieces measuring 3.5 by 11.5. If you're using directional fabric, you're gonna want the direction to run up and down this way. You can also fussy cut your design in the middle here if you'd like, as your handles are going to be located around here, so you can fussy cut it in the center. For print B, you're going to need one piece measuring 11.5 by 12.5. Directional fabric isn't recommended for this piece because it is going to wrap around the whole bottom, so one side will end up upside down if you use directional fabric. I'm using a faux suede material, but you can also use 100% quilting cotton, you can use vinyl, any material you'd like. Just please note that if you do change the material on the bottom, the structure of the bag may range. So for example, if you choose a 100% quilting cotton instead for the bottom, it is a more flimsy material, so you may require a stiffer interfacing to give the bag more structure and to make sure it stands nicely. So just remember that when you're choosing your materials. From print C, you'll need one piece measuring 11.5 wide by 18.5 high, and directional fabric once again isn't recommended for this because it will be like this in the lining and you don't want it upside down anywhere. You'll need two pieces measuring 4.5 by 16. These are for your handles. Again, please don't use directional fabric because these will be like this. You'll then need two pieces measuring 1.5 by 11.5. This is for the rim that goes around the bag. You'll next need a piece of fusible fleece measuring 18.5 by 11.5. I'm using Pelon 987F, but you may use a different stabilizer depending on the materials you've chosen. Lastly, you'll need a number 3 nylon zipper that measures 8.5 inches. I got mine from a package by Sally Tomato. It's a metal look-alike zipper. So I just cut it down to size and I inserted my pulls, and I actually got this from Sewers Club. Beginning with our first sewing step, you're going to take your two print C pieces measuring 1.5 by 11.5, and you're going to fold them in half with wrong sides facing. Mine are already folded. By bringing the longer edges together, you're going to press it at the iron. Then you're going to take your print B piece measuring 12.5 by 11.5, and you're going to line each one of these with the 11.5 inch sides. So one like that, and one like that. You're then going to increase your stitch length on your sewing machine to the max to do a basting stitch, and we're going to sew along this edge and this edge close to the edge to hold both of these strips in place. A tip when sewing the strips in place is to sew on the side of the faux suede. This will help combat any stretching. With your two pieces of print C measuring 4.5 by 16, what we're going to do is we're going to fold and press them. So I've already done it so that it's easier for me to show you. But what you're first going to do is you're going to bring the longer edges together and fold it in half with wrong sides facing. You're going to press this edge with your iron so it creases. You're going to open it back up, and then you're going to take the two outer folds or two outer edges, and you're going to bring them into that creased middle. So 1 and 2. So it should look something like that. You're going to press again to crease those outer edges. And with that center fold, you're just going to fold one more time so the raw edges are tucked inside. You're going to do that to both strips, and then you're going to sew close to the edge on both sides to secure. Next, what we're going to do, taking our print B piece, is we're going to find the middle of the two 11.5 inch sides where we sewed the strips. So we're going to fold it in half, matching the two edges, and we're going to mark it with our marking pen. So that's 1, and that's 2 right here. You're then going to get your ruler and you're going to mark an inch, 0.75 out from each side of that center marking. So 1 and 2, and you're going to do that on both sides. Mine's now marked, and then you're going to take your 2 handles, starting with one of them. We're going to align the first end with our first marking, and to make sure it's not twisted, we're going to hold it out straight like this, and then we're going to bend it to the second marking. So as you can see here, it's not twisted at all. Then we're going to sew across the ends of the handles close to the edge, making sure to backstitch to hold it in place temporarily, so both of them. And then we're going to repeat on this side. So handle, rotate, and sew across. Your handles should look something like this now. You're then going to take your 2 print A pieces measuring 3.5 by 11, and you're going to place one on each side like this, just to see our direction of our fabric. So if our bag is oriented this way, we want the direction, as you can see with this butterfly, it's correct. So that's how we want our direction. We're going to flip our piece with right sides facing, and we're going to sew across with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to repeat on this side. So we're going to orient our piece to pay attention to the direction of our fabric if it's directional. Like so. And then we're going to place it on top with right sides facing and sew across with the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that it's sewn, you're just going to open up your 2 pieces like so, and you're going to give it a good press at the iron. You're then going to fuse the wrong side of your fabric, so the wrong side here, to the glue or bumpy side of your fusible fleece. Just make sure to maybe put a layer of fabric between your faux suede and your iron so that you don't apply direct heat, because it does have some plastic content, so it may melt or burn. Now that it's fused, we're just going to press our handles up and straight. So this one like that, and also the other one on the other side. And what you're going to do is you're just going to sew across here to hold it down, here and here. The next step after that is going to be a 2-inch rectangle, but we're going to measure that from the seam we sew now. So we're just going to start with that seam. Now that the seams are sewn, you're going to get a ruler and an erasable marking pen, and you're going to mark 2 inches up from your seam, like I have here. Then you're going to sew using the seams you sewed to secure your handles as a guide. You're going to start here, sew up, turn, making sure to backstitch a ton here because this is going to be the main point of tension when things are in your bag. You're going to turn back down and making sure to backstitch again here. You're going to do that to all of the ends of your handle. I already have mine done, so as you can see here, they're nice and secure. Now that our handles are sewn down, we're going to mark our corners. So taking a ruler and an erasable marking pen, we're going to measure 1.25 inches down and 1.5 inches in, so it's a rectangle. I'm just drawing it with my marking pen, but we're actually going to cut this square out. So you can use some scissors after and cut it out, or your rotary blade or your rotary cutter. And the reason we're measuring a rectangle and not a square is we're going to be sewing this side later on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this will become 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches. Now, since this is also a raw edge, you're probably wondering, isn't that going to be sewn too? And it is. But when we sew it to the zipper actually adds a 1/4 inch later, so it'll even out. So that's why we're doing a rectangle. And you're going to cut this out, and you're going to repeat that on this corner and these 2 top corners. Once your corners are cut, your piece should look like that. You're then going to repeat it with the lining piece. So this is my lining piece with these corners, just like so. Taking our zipper, we're now going to remove the pulls and open our zipper, so split it. We're going to place half our zipper tape on each side, so we'll line the 8.5 inch edges here. The right side of the zipper should face the right side of the fabric, and we're going to sew across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the fusible fleece side. And we're going to repeat on this side. So align, making sure the right side of the zipper is facing the right side of the fabric, and sew across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the fusible fleece side. Now that both halves of our zipper are sewn to our exterior, we're going to grab our lining piece and we're going to place it on top with right sides facing. We're going to align our 8.5-inch edges over here with the zipper on both sides. And then we're going to sew across on the fusible fleece side in line with the seam we just sewed on this side and on this side. With the lining sewn to our zipper, we're now going to turn to the right side by going in here and pulling our right side of our fabrics out. You're going to give your fabrics a good press so that the fabric is away from the zipper. You're just going to be careful not to put too much heat on the zipper since it is nylon or plastic and you don't want it to melt. So you're going to do that on this side and this side. And once it's nicely pressed, you're going to do a top stitch on both sides of the zipper. So on that side and this side. Now that our top stitches are done on both sides of the zipper, we're going to flip it over like this, and then we're going to insert our 2 zipper pulls, one from one side, one from the other. I'm actually going to flip this around, and I'm going to show you how I insert the zipper pull. So starting with one side, I insert 1/2 of the zipper inside the pull. Then I slide the other half in, like that, and I tap just a little bit until the 2 ends are even, like so. So once they're even, I use my finger here on the back, and then I just pull, just like that. So now I'm going to add this one. Now that your pulls have been added, you want to make sure that everything is even, meaning that the pegs align properly. So I'm going to open up my zipper slightly and I'm going to explain. So as you can see here, both sides of my zipper are even. There's the same amount of tape on both sides. If one of my pulls was uneven, one side of the tape might have more than the other, and you're going to have a bunch in the middle. So as you can see here, if one is bigger, you'll have a bit of a bunch in the middle because there's too much tape in the middle than there needs to be because it's off somewhere in here. So if you find that yours is off, all you have to do is slide the pull out and reinsert it until both ends are even, just like this. From there, what we're going to do is we're just going to sew a couple stitches across our zipper here and here close to the edge so that when we turn to the wrong side, this never opens up on us. With that all done, we're just going to turn to the wrong side of our fabric by going inside here and pulling it all out. We're just going to make sure that all of our layers are nice and aligned, so our rectangles that we cut out earlier, as well as the sides of our fabric, make sure everything is correctly aligned. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to match our side seams here, so the joining seams, and our rim, so the accent fabric, the print C accent fabric. We're going to match it right here, and if you'd like, you can actually sew a little stitch on top close to the edge just to hold it in place on both sides, because what we're going to do now is we're going to sew the sides closed. So we're going to sew this side, this side, this side, and this side all closed using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just sewing my pieces now, and it completely slipped my mind to mention that you should put an opening in one of the lining sides. I would say about a 3-inch opening because this is quite a big bag, but the size of the opening really depends with what you're comfortable with. Just please leave the opening on one of the sides in the middle here because we are going to do corners, so you don't want it to interfere with this corner or this corner. So on one of the sides. Now that that's done, just like before, we're going to do our corners. So I have my ruler and my marking pen, and this time instead of doing a rectangle, we're going to do a square using our seam and the folded edge, not the raw edge. So from the seam, we're going to measure 1.5 inches in, and from the folded edge, we're going to measure 1.5 inches in, so a square. Okay, I'm just going to mark it with my marking pen first, but we are going to cut this with either our rotary blade or our scissors. So I did it here. We're going to repeat and cut on this corner, and this corner. I've now cut all of my corners, and I just backstitched a little bit on each of these corners so that when I open them up to join them, nothing opens up or falls apart. Now, the reason we did 1.5 inches for these squares, different to these rectangles, is because we're not accounting for anything unfinished. We started at the seam and the fold, so everything was finished, so we could do an even square. Also, these squares are bigger because generally with these types of bags, the top has a smaller square than the bottom. The bottom is slightly bigger, so these ones are slightly bigger since they will be the bottom of the bag. The next thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna join our corners. So we're gonna open them up like this. I'm doing it on the lining so it's a little bit easier to open up and hold. So you're gonna open it up like this, as you can see here, and you're gonna sew across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure to backstitch on the seam and on each of the edges. You're gonna do that to this corner, this corner, this corner, and this corner. These ones are slightly different. They're kind of like a double version. So you're gonna open it up here and here. Okay, so you see it's like a double version. You have one from this side and one from this side. You're gonna make sure your center seams are aligned with the center of your zipper on both the exterior and interior. And you can even, if you'd like, hand baste it first to make sure they're nice and aligned. And then you're gonna sew across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, once again backstitching in those prime locations, so the center and sides. And these are a little bit more tricky, so if you have to take them apart or if you have to take your time, don't worry. I do that too all the time. But you're gonna do that here and over here. Something that I quickly want to mention is that when you're doing your corners, when you're putting your seam to one side when you're sewing across, you want to make sure that the corner up here also has the seam to the same side so that it's not twisted in here. So the same side. Now that all the corners are done, your bag should look something like this, like 2 different boxes. Next, what you're gonna do is you're gonna trim all of your strings, maybe give your bag a little lint roll to make sure there's no strings stuck inside. And then we're gonna turn it inside out from the opening. So as you're turning it inside out, you're gonna wanna push all of these corners out, and you're also gonna wanna give your bag a press because it is gonna be quite wrinkly when it comes out. The last thing to do now is just to go into our lining and get our opening. Press the raw edges inside, as you can see that I did, and then you can either sew across here close to the edge by machine to catch all those layers. You want to do it close to the edge because we did use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you want to make sure you catch the fabric inside, or you can sew it by hand with a hand sewing needle. But you're just going to tuck that back inside, and your Forest Friends box bag is now complete. This is mine here. I have my zipper at the top, and that's the other side. I really hope you enjoyed this sewing tutorial. As always, you can find other projects here on my YouTube channel. You can also check out my Etsy shop and my Instagram, which are all linked down below. See you next time with another project.